Over the last few years, the Subaru Crosstrek has not just become the best-selling subcompact crossover in America, it's become one of the best-selling Subarus worldwide, thanks to its blend of low sticker price, high practicality, and of course its off-road capability, which we are exploring here in the Catskill Mountains on a ski resort in the mud and in the freezing rain. Subaru's Crosstrek is the best smelling. The observant among you might be thinking to yourself, hang on, didn't you just review the Crosstrek in Palm Springs? The answer is yes, of course, but not this Crosstrek. This is the new, more powerful version, which you'll find in Sport, Limited, and of course the new Wilderness trim coming soon. Under the hood, we have a 2.5-liter boxer producing 182 horsepower, a notable bump over the base engine at 152. But before we talk about that, let's talk about the front end design. We of course get LED headlights up front, these steer in the corners, LED fog lights below. Sorry about the mud, we have been diving through mud holes all day long, which is really fun in the Crosstrek. We get some different colored accents going on here on the side. And one thing that I like is that the grille no longer has a frame around it. It sort of blends into the front end, and it helps tie the two headlights together with this little strip running right there across the front. In addition to a low starting price of $24,995, which includes all-wheel drive and an automatic transmission, I think the other reason so many shoppers have flocked to the Crosstrek is its very practical nature. You'll notice that this is shaped kind of like the Subaru Outback. It has the same formula here. It's a lifted 5-door hatchback. The body is actually shared with the Subaru Impreza hatchback, and the Crosstrek and the Impreza hatch have been such a success they don't even bother making an Impreza sedan anymore. The distinct advantage to this format of lifted hatchback is the low roofline. You'll notice we have over 8 inches of ground clearance under here, but we have a roofline that is considerably lower than even something like the Jeep Compass or the Bronco Sport, definitely on the smaller side for a crossover in the US. So if you are an outdoorsy activities person, getting your kayak, your bicycles, your roof tent, etc. onto the top of this is going to be an awful lot easier. In addition to that, the driving position on the inside is somewhere between worlds. It's a little bit more relaxed than the average crossover like a Bronco Sport, but a little bit more upright than the average sedan as well. And then we get the aerodynamic profile, which certainly leads to better fuel economy. The lifted hatch styling continues out back where we find partial LED taillight modules. I do wish that the turn signals and backup lights were LEDs. You'll notice one of the other advantages to the lifted hatch design, a low load-in height back here. If you frequently carry lots of cargo, especially heavy cargo, or you have elderly pets that you might need to get into the back, this is going to certainly be a lot easier than some of those vehicles that are higher off the ground. But because of the smaller dimensions we have in the Crosstrek, we actually have a better approach and departure angles than you might suspect. Of course, if you want to take things to the next level, that's where the Wilderness model comes in. It gets a completely different bumper in the back to improve departure angles even further. The Crosstrek may have a starting price just under $25,000, but if you want the 2.5-liter engine, you're going to have to be prepared to pay more. $28,995 plus destination is where this engine starts in the new Sport trim. That's going to give you 182 horsepower, 178 pound-feet of torque, a solid bump over the base engine at 152 horsepower. And interestingly, that power bump is not going to cost you any more at the pump. You'll still get 29 miles per gallon, even though we have that standard all-wheel drive system. This is one of the most efficient entries in this segment, including some of the mild hybrid options that are out there. Now, if you want more fuel economy, you could take a look at the Corolla Cross, and if you want more off-road capability, you could take a look at some of the Jeep or the Ford options, but they're going to cost you a lot more than $29,000. Since many of you have probably seen the video on the 2-liter Crosstrek and the related Impreza, let's just take a very quick look around the inside of this 2.5-liter model. Since this is the limited trim, we have a power driver seat. This is something you're going to find only in this trim and optional in the Wilderness. This has the leather upholstery with some contrasting accents. You can see we have orange accents inside the perforations on the seat bottom and seat back cushion. These are not ventilated though, they are just heated. Lots of orange stitching around here, but if you want to take the stitching game to the next level, that's going to be the Wilderness trim. We have some more aggressive bolstering on these seats, height adjustable shoulder belts, and the optional moonroof right up there. It's a pretty standard size. Decent amount of soft touch materials on the doors, but the majority of the dashboard is made from more hard and rubbery plastics, which I think is just fine for the price tag, especially since we have this really big, just over 11.5-inch infotainment system in the dashboard. This is not technically standard. A 2-screen setup is standard, but you'll find this in everything except for the base trim. Now, in compensation for that, I guess you could say we have a mostly analog instrument cluster over here. So 2 big dials, small color LCD in the middle, standard 3-spoke steering wheel with lots of buttons on the front. If you're sad that some vehicles have been missing buttons, don't worry, Subaru found them all and put them on this wheel. The rear seats are definitely roomy. A decent amount of headroom is found back here, but not quite as much headroom as you find in the Bronco Sport because of its boxy profile. And you'll notice that the wagon-esque shape that we find here does cut down on rear visibility for the rear seat passengers and of course for the driver as well, because we do have that roofline that slopes there towards the rear. If you were hoping that the 2.5-liter models would gain rear seat air vents, you may be a bit disappointed, but we do find USB charge points back there. As you'd expect in a Subaru, there's lots of cargo practicality going on back here. We have a roller-style cargo cover. The shoulder belt for the center section does come out of the side, which is not my favorite, but we have lots of accessory mats available, mats for the backs of the seats. We even have mats for the rear doors, which are a really cool touch if you have pets and you don't want them to scratch up the door panels. Back here in the cargo area, though, we have the Crosstrek mat here with the rivery theme. We also have some mountain accents right there, sort of Easter egg things. This GoPro got stuck in the mud, so sorry about that. You'll notice that footage in the drive section. Under the floor, we have a spare tire, but it is not a full-size spare. It is a compact, of course, but at least we have one. We also have the jack and the tire iron in there, and a little bit of additional storage space on the sides. If I move this out of the way, you can see that we have a sort of Nalgene-sized holder over there. What better way to put the 2.5-liter Crosstrek to the test than to come out here to the Catskill Mountains and take this out on a ski run? Well, obviously not a downhill ski run, but basically what sort of look like mountain biking trails all the way up the hillside, and we're going to make our way all the way up to the top. This is really where an off-road oriented vehicle like the Crosstrek shines. The suspension on this vehicle is definitely softer than a CR-V or something like a Corolla Cross, and that means that on a rougher surface like we're on here, you can tell this is definitely a pretty rough surface, the way the cameras are all bouncing around. This is an awful lot more comfortable to drive. And then we have the all-wheel drive system that is always trying to send power around to all four wheels. This is not a reactionary style all-wheel drive system, although it will obviously react to the traction and send even more power wherever it's needed. Now, I do wish that we had a traditional automatic transmission in this vehicle at times, because the CVT doesn't have the lowest starting ratio available. Now, that's where the upcoming Wilderness model is going to come in, because we're going to get the same amount of power out of its 2.5-liter engine, but we're going to get a more aggressive final drive ratio, so you get more mechanical advantage going uphill. And we do have the ability to move these paddles around and stick this into a fixed ratio to help you up the hills, but it's never going to feel quite like a stepped automatic transmission. If you want something with a bit more pep, there are turbocharged options in this segment, most notably the Jeep Compass, which is going to be the most direct competitor to this. On this mud-ruddy surface right here, you can definitely see that the traction control is kicking in here. We're allowing a lot of wheel slip in this mud mode to help us get up the hill. A lot of people don't realize this, but in mud, you really want the wheels to spin up to eject the mud, so that way you have improved traction. Now, keep in mind that something like the Jeep Compass is going to be a lot more expensive than this, but in some situations, it may be a bit more capable because of the design of its all-wheel drive system, etc. Just keep that price tag in mind. Now, if you want to take things to the next level of capability, that's where the Wilderness model is going to come in. It is going to be about this price, or maybe a little bit more expensive depending on exactly how you have it configured, but it's going to give you a more aggressive final drive ratio, standard all-terrain tires from the factory, and a bit more underbody protection. Remember that the Crosstrek is really billed as the pragmatist's all-around vehicle. This is the kind of vehicle that's great for daily commuting. We have excellent highway fuel economy, 33 miles per gallon with this 2.5-liter engine, but we still have a decent amount of off-road capability when you want to go through stickier stuff. Say you're out on the farm visiting a relative or something like that, but you live in the city. This is certainly the kind of vehicle that can take this kind of terrain. There's definitely some muddy moguls here that Subaru has set up. It's absolutely great on this terrain. And thanks to the light curb weight, it doesn't need some of the more complicated all-wheel drive systems that you find in some of the competition. This is significantly lighter than something like the Jeep Cherokee, which has now sailed off into the sunset, for instance. So what I've always loved about Subaru's lineup is the blend of realistic, practical off-road capability with a lightweight fuel economy mission, decent on-road handling thanks to the lightweight, and of course a decent ride as well, which again is enabled by the light curb weight in the vehicle. If you want the next level in off-road capability, there are other options out there. This is not going to be the right vehicle for you, but you'd be surprised by how much you could actually do in a small and inexpensive Subaru. Just like these mud pits out here, this is an awful lot of fun. As far as on-road driving matters go, we've definitely spent a lot of time in this model, and of course a few months ago I spent a lot of time in the 2-liter model. You can definitely tell that Subaru has spent a lot of time refining the transmission and the engine in the Crosstrek. That was one complaint with Subaru's boxer engine in the past, is that it just wasn't as refined as some of the inline engines from the competition. Well, the engine noise has definitely been reduced, and the engine refinement has definitely been improved. The CVT, it's still not going to be everybody's cup of tea. I might personally prefer a stepped automatic transmission and maybe a turbocharged engine, but keep in mind the fuel economy penalties for making those choices. And again, this is that dual-purpose vehicle, the efficient daily driver that you can also take further off the beaten path. For me at least, the biggest thing with the Crosstrek is the ride quality. Driving this pretty hard out on these trails, it is still very comfortable. And that's not something that I could say about a decent number of all-wheel drive vehicles that this competes with. A lot of vehicles that are more street-focused are going to be a lot firmer, and they're really going to knock your teeth out on a trail like this. If you're going to spend an hour or two down a gravel road at a national park, you want to get further, closer to that trailhead that you're interested in, this is going to be an awful lot more comfortable. Now's a good time to talk about the traction management software in the Crosstrek. If you get the 2-liter engine, you get normal mode and you get snow and dirt mode. Subaru calls that the single X mode setup because there's just one off-road mode. This is the dual X mode setup in the 2.5-liter engine equipped models. You'll also find this in the Subaru Crosstrek Wilderness. This adds a deep snow and mud mode. In this mode, it's going to allow a lot more wheel spin, it's going to reduce the traction control intervention even more, and send more power to the rear axle. This is needed because if you actually are in deep mud and you're trying to travel forward, you need to eject the mud from the tire. You need to actually let it spin up to get that mud out of the tire so that we can continue traveling through it. Now, interestingly, if you're in snow, you actually want snow to pack in those tires, but you still want wheel slip allowed so that way it can send power around where it's needed and you can try and get above that snow to try and drive along. In addition to sending more power to the rear, deep snow and mud is also going to be a bit more aggressive at sending power across the axles, but we don't have any sort of locking differentials in this vehicle. We also don't have any locking differentials available in the Wilderness trim. If you want to take things to the next level, you're going to have to look at a very narrow set of competitors, and they're all going to cost a lot more than this. Now that Jeep has canceled the Cherokee, you're basically just looking at a Bronco Sport if you want effectively a limited slip or locking functionality in the back. I'll talk about this more in a bit, but I think the Bronco Sport is a really interesting competitor to this. Clearly, it's going to be a lot more expensive, but I think it looks really good. It's also a bit more practical. It has a bigger, squarer cargo area in the back, a bit more rear seat headroom, and you can get that 2-liter turbo option with the torque vectoring rear axle. Now to the nitty-gritty. How much is the Crosstrek going to set you back? Well, it starts at $24,995 for the 2-liter engine. That goes up to $28,995 if you want the 2.5-liter engine in the Sport trim. The Sport trim includes all of the standard feature content you find in the 2-liter top-end version, plus some extra content just for the 2.5-liter model, like the LED accent lights that are going on in the headlights up front. LEDs are standard in the base trim, but not the upgraded accents. We also get the wireless charger on the inside and the dual-mode X-mode software system in addition to the extra power. Of course, the 11.6-inch infotainment system, fog lights, and roof rails are standard on all 2.5-liter models because you'll also find those on the top-end 2-liter trim. At the moment, the top-end trim is the limited trim, which starts at $30,895 and will go up to $35,030, including destination, fully loaded, as this model is right here. This trim adds on some additional active safety systems like the autonomous emergency evasive steering system, rear autonomous emergency braking, the leather upholstery on the inside, the power driver seat, etc. But no power passenger seat in the top-end version of the Crosstrek. If you want those features, you have to work your way up to more expensive Subaru models. The most rugged interpretation of the Crosstrek is going to be the new Wilderness trim. It's going to come in just under $32,000, and it's going to be on sale a little bit later this year. We don't have final top-end pricing on that model, but you can expect it to end up right about the same as this top-end limited trim, so about $35,000, including destination. In this pricing range and in this size category, there are two really close competitors that come to mind, the Jeep Compass and the Ford Bronco Sport. I think the Bronco Sport is the most attractive of the three. I do like its boxy form, but clearly it's going to be less practical for people that really want to use things like the load rails. Also, it's not going to be as efficient as the Crosstrek, and boy is it going to be more expensive. If you want the most capable version of that Bronco Sport, it's going to be $38,000 starting for the Badlands trim, or as we've been calling it so far today, the Badlands trim. At any rate, I'm running on about 4 hours of sleep, so sorry there, everybody. That model will have 250 horsepower under the hood, and it's going to have the twin-clutch rear axle setup, which is really unique. It offers not only torque vectoring functionality in the back, but also true mechanical limited slip functionality. The Bronco Sport will also command more of a complete lock of the center coupling, something that the Crosstrek is not capable of doing in this generation. So if you want to take things to the next level, the Badlands trim is there with that all-wheel drive capability, but know that it's going to set you back quite a lot. The Badlands trim starts at about $38,000, add options to it, if you want the Heritage trim, etc., you're decently over $40,000. And the Wilderness trim of this is going to start at around $32,000. That's going to be a solid package with higher fuel economy and still absolutely excellent off-road capability. If you're planning on doing more aggressive off-roading than we've been doing out here in the Catskill Mountains in this limited trim, keep in mind it's not the Wilderness trim here, then I would assume that you're probably realistically shopping for a Wrangler or a real Bronco anyway. The thing to know about the subcompact crossover segment in America right now is that it is truly hot business, and just about every entry out there is very competitive, from the Kia Seltos to the Hyundai Kona to the new Corolla Cross Hybrid, which is really tasty with its fuel economy. It's just not going to be this kind of off-road capable. In fact, I would not have taken it on anything other than the gravel road that we're on here with that all-wheel drive system. But if you're looking for snow capability, gravel road capability, and 50 miles per gallon, that's really the only game in town. It still is, interestingly enough though, going to cost you more than the Crosstrek. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section, and stay tuned because we should have one of these at home for a full battery of tests coming soon. And of course, we're going to be testing the Wilderness model, and I'm really interested to see what Subaru has cooked up for that trip, because we spent way more time in the mud than I was thinking we were going to in this, again, limited trim with regular all-season tires on it. Put that one in at the end. So, it's the best smelling small crossover in America. It smells so good, I want to do dirt lines off the back. Don't put that part in, it's a family channel.